Open town council meetings continue in Colombia after the Senate's opposition to the social reforms promoted by President Gustavo Petro. Panamanian unions are intensifying the indefinite nationwide strike amid the government's refusal to dialogue. And according to the UN humanitarian coordinator Tom Fletcher, 14,000 babies in Gaza have just 48 hours left to live if Israel continues to delay the entry of aid. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. In Colombia, open town council meetings continue after the parliamentary vote that prevented the advancement of social reforms promoted by President Gustavo Petro. After Petro's proposal to carry out a citizen participation exercise was denied last May 14th in the Senate plenary, the government claimed that the process was plagued by fraudulent maneuvers and irregularities and called on citizens to declare themselves in permanent assembly in defense of their rights. In this context, Petro declared he will attend a popular rally organized in the northern city of Barranquilla on Tuesday and announced that important instructions will be given from that city to the whole nation. And the president of Ecuador, Daniel Noboa, sent an urgent economic bill to the National Assembly entitled to disarticulate the criminal economy linked to the internal armed conflict. However, several analysts denounced that this bill would blow up several constitutional rights. Our colleague Gabriela Mena with the details.
The president of Ecuador submitted a new urgent economic bill, which, according to the executive, is intended to dismantle the criminal economy linked to the internal armed conflict. Several analysts agree with this, rejecting the document, starting with the fact that it covers security issues that violate rights, but it is not about economics.
Es decir, usted tiene una serie de violaciones.
That is to say, it has a series of violations to constitutional guarantees that have been established, and that have been established with certainty, and that come even from centuries ago.
Desde hace siglos atrás, que son conquistas en el tema de garantizar las libertades y la protección de la integridad.
These are conquests in the matter of guaranteeing the freedoms of the protection of people's integrity. This denaturalizes the subject of a bill on matters of economic urgency. That is to say, yes, it is being misused by the executive for the benefit of complying with the introduction of this regulation.
De cumplir con la introducción de estas normativas.
Por lo que destaca, debería este proyecto ser archivado por el Consejo de Administración.
Therefore, this project should be filed by the Legislative Administration Council, which has the decision to decide whether or not this document should be dealt with within the Parliament. For the constitutionalist, Alberto Montenegro, the Assembly is a body without nuances, without weights and counterweights, for which reason the project will surely be passed.
Yo pensaría que tratarían de evitar.
I would think that they would try to avoid a pronouncement against it for any other repercussion and to avoid any kind of setbacks within the legislature.
Para evitar cualquier tipo de contratiempos dentro del legislativo, ¿no?
It is going to be a state policy. Everything included in this regulation is going to be the way they are going to act during all these 4 years, persecuting, locking up.
Todos estos 4 años, persiguiendo, encerrando.
Pero, ¿cuáles son los principales puntos que preocupan a los analistas? Para empezar, en este
But what are the main points of concern for analysts? To begin with, this document's articles violate the constitutional right to the inviolability of the home because if approved, a court order would no longer be required for searches, nor for seizure and confiscation. In addition, this project violates the constitutional presumption of innocence with the introduction of the categories of suspect or military objective to motivate actions by security agencies.
Sospechoso u objetivo militar para motivar actuaciones de órganos de seguridad.
Prácticamente un retroceso, pero también.
Practically speaking, this is a step backwards, but they are also measures that, by limiting the exercise of rights, give the government in power an open hand so that it can use these situations, not only with organized crime groups, but also with opposition groups.
Otro de los puntos que genera preocupación de
Another point of concern within this project is that, according to analysts, it will allow impunity for the national police and the armed forces because they could continue in service without preventive detention or house arrest while an investigation against them continues.
Continúa una investigación en su contra.
La fuerza pública va a abusar bajo todo
The public force is going to abuse under any kind of consideration. There will be no limits.
Porque lo grave, o una de las cosas más graves de esta ley, es que el presidente
Because the most serious aspect of this law is that the president, in advance or in anticipation,
presidenciales para aquellos funcionarios policiales y militares que en el marco de
will issue presidential pardons for those police and military officials who, within the framework of this law, may disappear or kill citizens.
desaparecer, matar a ciudadanos.
Sin embargo, lo que por ahora es un hecho es que en los próximos días el Consejo...
However, what is a fact for now is that in the next few days the legislative will announce whether or not it will approve the urgent economic project. In case of being approved, the Assembly has 30 days to pronounce itself.
Gabriela Mena, teleSUR Ecuador.
And the union's indefinite strike in Panama is intensifying across the country and amid government's refusal to engage in dialogue on Law 462 of the Social Security Fund. Amidst repression, persecution and arrest of those involved in the protests, the Single National Union of Workers in Construction and Similar Industries held a General Assembly to plan further strike action. Some actors, such as nursing, have expressed support for a staggered strike. Union groups are demanding that José Raúl Molino's government repeal Law 462 of the Social Security Fund, alleging that the reform will privatize services and increase the retirement age, among other things. Mexican federal forces have carried out an operation in the state of Sinaloa where they arrested 11 people, including 3 minors, linked to a criminal group. Authorities report that the arrests were made in the municipality of Culiacán, where firearms, vehicles, and tactical equipment were seized. The operation was the result of previous investigations and was carried out with the collaboration of several agencies. During the operation, 4 men and a woman were detained in a property after obtaining a search warrant, while the other 6 people were arrested during surveillance patrols in 2 different points of the city. These actions highlight the Mexican government's ongoing effort to combat violence associated with organized crime in the country. By sailing the southern U.S. border. The official praised the assistance provided by the neighboring nation and suggested that Canada should follow suit. Patel noted that more than 300 suspected drug traffickers crossed the border regularly in 2024. 85% of them entered through the Canadian border. The United States has not been able to control fentanyl consumption crisis generated by pharmaceutical companies that continue in-country without taking responsibility. Washington has opted to hold Mexico and Canada responsible. We now have our short break coming up. First, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Bolivia, candidate registration for the general elections of August 17th closed in a tense atmosphere of expectation and uncertainty due to the renewed intervention of the judiciary in electoral processes. Our correspondent Frei Morales with details.
Tension and uncertainty overcome the expectation of knowing the candidates for the elections of next August 17th. The Front for Victory, grouping that could be used by former President Evo Morales, was observed.
Here is the appeal document, and the deadline is until today. But they are obliged to comply with the regulation they have made. But they do not even subject to regulation.
Senate President Andrónico Rodríguez's Third System movement was also questioned, as was the Christian Democratic Party.
They are trying to annul, it is true, but they did not succeed. It is there is no reason per se.
The left, represented by leaders born in the movement for socialism, promotes 3 tickets, among them that of former President Evo Morales, who is proposing Will Malanoca for the vice presidency.
With a government plan that I am sure will do them good, whether or not they are supporters of the Evo Pueblo movement, because Bolivia will be saved for the second time by a man who has demonstrated commitment and honesty for 14 years.
Senate President Andrónico Rodríguez lists the former planning minister of ex-president Evo Morales, Mariana Prado, as his vice presidential running mate.
Enfrentamos una disyuntiva histórica.
We face a historical dilemma: the continuity of the democratic revolution culture, or the closing of a cycle that profoundly transformed our homeland from 2006 to 2019 under the leadership of our brother Evo Morales, which we cannot ignore in any way.
And the Movement for Socialism, a grouping that legally remained in the sector of President Luis Arce, who declined to continue as a candidate to promote the unity of the left, has as candidates his former Minister of Government Eduardo del Castillo and farmer leader Milán Berna.
I salute and applaud the decision of President Luis Arce, who has declined the candidacy to seek the unity of the political instrument. It is not because I am the only one that I am the leader. President Arce wants the unity of the political instrument.
The candidacies of Evo Morales and Andrónico Rodríguez were observed due to the legality of the political groupings under which they are running. The Vice President of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, Francisco Vargas, warned in social media that the interference of the judiciary in admitting political losses puts at risk the very continuity of the democratic system in the country.
Freddy Morales, TeleSUR, Bolivia.
The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, assured U.S. President Donald Trump that his country is working towards a fair settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. This was confirmed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, during an Orthodox Easter celebration event. The head of Russian diplomacy assured attendees that Moscow had only reaffirmed its position on the final settlement of a crisis that Moscow claims was created by the West. At the end of Monday's call, which lasted more than 2 hours, President Vladimir Putin described it as frank and informative. Moscow has reiterated its readiness to collaborate with Kiev on a memorandum for a future peace treaty. And in this regard, on Tuesday, China's foreign ministry reaffirmed its support for direct dialogue and negotiations between Russia and Ukraine.
We noted the reports. China supports all efforts conducive to peace, direct dialogue and negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, and a political resolution to the crisis. We hope all parties can reach a fair, lasting, and binding peace agreement that is acceptable to all parties through dialogue and negotiation.
The President of China, Xi Jinping, reaffirmed his commitment to promoting high-quality development and enhancing governance efficiency in order to advance the country's modernization. During his visit to Henan province on Monday and Tuesday, President Xi Jinping inspected the region's economic zones and emphasized the importance of accelerated modernization to promote community development. He also emphasized that these processes would facilitate the growth of advanced manufacturing, enhance the protection and utilization of historical heritage, and promote the development of quality in the cultural and tourism sectors. He said that China must be self-sufficient and master technologies, production, education, and research to advance further. The World Health Organization adopted on Tuesday a landmark pandemic agreement for tackling outbreaks of disease after more than 3 years of negotiations. Hailed as a victory for public health by WHO's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the agreement aims to build on the lessons of COVID-19 and protect the globe from pathogenic threats. In this regard, Ghebreyesus highlighted the accords are a recognition by the international community that our citizens, societies, and economies must not be left vulnerable to suffer losses like those endured during COVID-19. Plans for a pandemic treaty were first announced in March 2021. It's worth highlighting that the United States will not be part of the agreement, having withdrawn from the WHO and negotiations after Donald Trump took office. We now have our second and final short break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final break, we'll be back with more. Welcome back. According to the UN Humanitarian Coordinator Tom Fletcher, 14,000 babies in Gaza have just 48 hours left to live if Israel continues to delay the entry of aid. Under pressure from his allies and other countries, Benjamin Netanyahu has agreed to authorize the entry of 9 truckloads of aid. However, the UN says this is less than 2% of what is needed, and Netanyahu has only allowed 5 truckloads of aid so far. Meanwhile, Fletcher sent a message to the world saying that he wants to save as many babies as possible. He has the personnel and an organized emergency strategy to distribute the aid. However, after 11 weeks of an ironclad blockade and delays imposed by the genocidal occupier, these delays have become a death sentence for children. And on Tuesday, Israel killed more than 60 Palestinians in Gaza since dawn. Medical authorities confirm a genocidal pattern. Most of the victims are women and children. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would seize Gaza. Since then, the Israeli regime continues bombing the enclave. In Deir al-Balah, occupation forces assassinated the Abu Samra family, in total 12 people. In another bombing in Nusayrat, 15 Palestinians were slaughtered, at least 7 were children. Shellings continued throughout the enclave. Authorities reported more than 10 dead and many wounded in Khan Yunis and Al Zaytun. Since October 7th, the occupation has killed more than 53,400 civilians and wounded more than 121,000, mostly women and children. Meanwhile, in Yemen, the Houthis announced a maritime blockade of the Israeli port of Haifa in response to Israel's ongoing conflict in Gaza. In a televised statement, Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sari warned that all companies with ships present in the port will be considered targets. The high official declared the decision is in response to Israel's escalation against the Palestinian people and the attacks on Yemen. It is important to emphasize that the Houthis have remained firm in their position of defense of the Palestinian cause since the beginning of the Israeli genocide in October 2023.
In response to the Israeli enemy's escalation of its brutal aggression against our people, and in Gaza committing dozens of massacres daily and causing hundreds of casualties in an unprecedented act of genocide. And in response to the continued siege and starvation and the enemy's refusal to halt its aggression and lift the blockade. The Yemeni armed forces, relying on God and with his guidance, have decided to implement the leadership's directives to begin working to enforce a naval blockade of the port of Haifa. All companies with ships present in or heading to this port are hereby notified that, as of the time of this announcement, the aforementioned port has been included in the target bank. They must take into account what is stated in this announcement and any future statements.
Heavy rains swamped parts of India's tech capital, Bengaluru, killing at least 3 people and exposing long-standing infrastructure failures. The rapid growth of the southern city, dubbed India's Silicon Valley, has left many waterways covered over or used as dumps, leading to water stagnating every year during heavy rains. The city is on high alert for more pre-monsoon showers due to cyclonic formations over the Andaman Sea. 3 people, including a 12-year-old boy, were killed in rain-related incidents on Monday. Authorities say the city corporation has identified 210 flood-prone areas where they were working round the clock to rectify the situation. Many parts of the city received 100 millimeters of rain on Monday, a record since 2011. At this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.